Hey, Paul here, and in this video we're going to talk about whether long-term care Medicaid eligibility is ethical. So as you may know, some people want to structure their estate, structure what they have, title things in a way so if they get sick and need long-term care in a nursing home, that they don't have to use their own assets, they qualify for Medicaid, the government pays for their care, and they can pass those assets along to their survivors and to their family. But there's really two schools of thought on whether that is appropriate, ethical, you fill in the word. So on the one hand, many people are perfectly comfortable availing themselves of the laws that were enacted by our state and federal government to minimize and use those laws to minimize the nursing home expenses and pass the savings along to their surviving children or other loved ones. On the other hand, however, are those who don't like the fact that there are attorneys and others who specialize in advising their clients how to save their money and qualify for this welfare program called Long Term Care Medicaid, qualify for it sooner because they say Medicaid is for the destitute. It wasn't designed as a way for the middle class to pass their estate to their children at taxpayer expense. So who's right? Well, let me give you an example, and ultimately you'll decide what's right, what's ethical, but let's talk about three different individuals, all pretty much in the same situation. They're all the same age. They earned about the same amount over the years. First, let's talk about Mr. Squander. Mr. Squander liked to have a good time, and over the years, he spent all of his money on wine, women, and song. And so when he turned 78 years old, he got sick. He didn't have much to his name. And so he immediately qualified for Medicaid. Medicaid paid for 100% of his nursing home expenses for many years, and then he died penniless. But you know what? Mr. Squander had a good time, and as soon as he got sick, the government paid for everything. So that's Mr. Squander. Mr. Save, on the other hand, his earnings were about the same as Mr. Squander, but Mr. Save, quite frankly, reminds me a little of my dad. Saved every single nickel or penny he ever made, and God bless Mr. Save, because he accumulated about $400,000 in savings. He worked hard, he sacrificed, never went out to eat, never took a vacation, but he saved his $400,000. He had his nest egg. But when Mr. Save turned 78 years old, he got sick and had to go in a nursing home. He was forced to spend the $400,000, didn't get any help from Medicaid or any other government agency, spent his $400,000 down to his last nickel, and then he died. He wasn't able to leave anything to his surviving family members. So that was Mr. Save. And then the third individual I want to tell you about is Mr. Savvy. Mr. Savvy, when he turned about 65 years old, he said, you know what? We got a system here that I want to make sure I take advantage of. And so he hired a lawyer, and based on advice and education that he had, he made some approved purchases. Maybe he gave some money to his kids. Maybe he set up the right kind of trust timely, and he protected his assets. So when he turned 78, everything was protected. He qualified for Medicaid. He too roughly had about $400,000 of savings, but it was all protected. Qualified for Medicaid, lived in the nursing home for several years. He died, and his family was able to benefit from Mr. Savvy's protections that he put in place. Saved, really he was able to benefit his family by about $400,000. So which one of those is more or less ethical than the other? Is Mr. Squander ethical because he didn't try to qualify for Medicaid and he just had a good time and spent everything, and then when he did get sick, because he never saved anything, he qualified for Medicaid? Or was Mr. Savvy unethical because he got advice on what the state and federal laws were, and certainly didn't try to hide anything and didn't try to lie about anything, but he just followed the rules and was able to protect everything? So let's look at it one other way, and then I'm going to let you decide. But if we, a lot of people, when we talk about is Medicaid planning ethical, people want to compare it to something. So they often compare it to tax planning. So as you can imagine, there are many people, some middle class, some wealthy, who hire advisors or just educate themselves, and they structure what they have a certain way to take advantage of tax deductions and tax credits, and they act in a certain way to pay as little tax as possible. And I don't know that there's any question about whether that is unethical. In fact, our United States Supreme Court, the highest law in the land, in a court case once said that the legal right of a taxpayer to decrease the amount of what otherwise would be his taxes or altogether avoid them by means which the law permits cannot be doubted. So I don't know, I've never heard of anybody who said you shouldn't take advantage of tax deductions that are available to you because that's unethical. So as far as taxes go, the courts, the judges, the taxpayers, the legislators all agree. If the government makes tax rules and you can legally take advantage of them for you and your family's benefit, you're not violating some patriotic duty to pay more taxes than you would otherwise be able to. So many look at Medicaid the same way. The government makes the rules. Both the Medicaid is a combined federal and state program. They make very particular rules, and people can follow those rules. And if they follow those rules that the government makes, then they can keep more of what they have for themselves and for their survivors. So I'd like to see in the comments below what your thoughts are on whether you feel like there's some kind of unethical area out there when it comes to protecting what you have, making yourself, structuring ownership and taking other actions to preserve and protect what you have, keep more for yourself, keep more for your family, and not be forced to squander, what you've worked for, like so many do on a daily basis. So in addition, what I'd like you to do is really smash the like button, turn it from gray to blue, and then if you could hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, then you won't miss anything as I produce these videos on a regular basis. All right, hope that helps. Love to see your comments below about whether you think Medicaid planning is right or wrong. We'll see you next time.